Hello, everyone, and good afternoon. My name is Joe Reardon. I'm the president and CEO of the Greater Kansas City Chamber of Commerce. And on behalf of our chamber and the World Trade Center, Kansas City, thank you for joining us today as we dive into the opportunities and tools to grow your business through the U.S. Trade and Development Agency's Making Global Local program. Trade is extremely important to our Kansas City region, and really now more than ever. The Chamber and the World Trade Center have long been committed to growing international trade by providing the resources and services necessary for our local businesses to compete successfully in the global marketplace. We are proud to be a regional partner of the USTDA Making Global Local program, and we're excited to work together to grow Kansas City's regional economy through trade. To let you know, we're recording today's program, and it will be available later for later viewing on our YouTube channel. It's now my pleasure to introduce to you a Kansas City native, the USTDA Chief Operating Officer and Head of Agency, Todd Abrahano. Todd leads the agency's export promotion efforts, supporting U.S. jobs and businesses in priority development projects within emerging markets in energy, transportation, ICT, healthcare, and agribusiness sectors. He previously served as Deputy Director Acting, as well as Senior Advisor to the Director of Agency. And before joining USTDA, he served as the Director of the Office of White House Liaison at the U.S. Department of Commerce. Mr. Abrahano received a Bachelor of Arts degree in Political Science with a concentration in International Relations from Yale. So please join me in welcoming Todd. And Todd, the virtual floor is now yours.
Joe, thank you so much. It's really a pleasure to be with you at the KC Chamber today. As you mentioned, I am a Kansas City native. It's where I grew up. I'm a proud graduate of Shawnee Mission East High School. So it's always good to be able to talk to people from my hometown. I've still got a lot of family back in Kansas City, so it's one of my favorite places in the world. Let me say thank you to the Chamber for hosting today. We really appreciate our partnership with the KC Chamber as one of our Making Global Local partners. And I'm pleased to be able to share with your membership and other people who are able to watch this video later what USTDA is all about and what we do and how we can be helpful. So with that, I will turn it back over to either you or my colleague Diane Cabral, who is joining us as well today.
Let me try that again. Hi, Todd. How are you?
Very good. Hi, Diane.
Good. Joe, thank you so much for the opportunity with the Kansas City Chamber of Commerce today. We're excited to reach out, and I know it brings particular excitement to Todd and Verinda, who both have Kansas City in their background. So it's a little bit like coming back home. I wanted to talk to you, Todd, a little bit, just if you could share some information about the general background of USTDA and the agency, just going back a bit. Can you provide some background on USTDA as a federal government agency, its history, who our key partners have been, and where the agency does its work around the world?
Sure. Thank you again for the opportunity. So USTDA is a fairly new government agency in terms of the history of the United States. We were officially stood up as an independent federal agency back in 1992. So we've been around for almost 30 years. Before that, we were a smaller program within the United States Agency for International Development, or USAID. USAID is typically known for more humanitarian foreign aid and development that they do in countries all over the world. And so as an economic and sort of export promotion part of USAID, Congress recognized that we had really a unique mandate and a unique mission. And so they spun us out as an independent federal agency, as I said, almost 30 years ago. So today, we partner with a number of our sister agencies and cabinet departments around the US government, most often working with the Department of State and their embassies across the globe, typically with their economic and political officers, as well as the ambassadors that are placed there in those countries. We work very, very closely with the Department of Commerce, my former employer before I came to USTDA. We work with their International Trade Administration and the U.S. Foreign and Commercial Service. So as you all may know, there are different US commercial service offices all over the United States, and they also have foreign offices all over the world, and we partner with them on a regular basis to really find out where the business opportunities are in the countries where we work. And so the last part of your question, Diane, where do we work around the world? Well, we are all over the globe. We typically, on an annual basis, will prioritize about 24 different countries in a number of different regions that we've sort of mapped out internally within the agency. I'll go ahead and just explain really briefly how we've done that. We've got 4 major regional departments within the agency. We've got the Indo-Pacific Region, and Verinda Fike, my colleague, is the regional director for that. She's also joining us today. We've got the Latin America and Caribbean region. We've got the MENA EE region, which is our Middle East, Northern Africa, and Europe and Eurasia region. And lastly, our last region is Sub-Saharan Africa. Now, there are some projects that we do that sort of lie outside of the scope of those 4 major regions, and we do have an additional business unit called Worldwide, where everything else sort of falls. But in terms of the priority countries where we work every year, typically, as I said, we have about 24 countries that we try to do the most of our work in, but we do work in other countries that we do not consider priority countries, as long as the opportunities are there, both in terms of the demand from the government or the private sector in that particular country, as well as demand from US industry on the US side.
Great. Thanks, Todd, for sharing some of the background of USTDA. That's really helpful. I know USTDA has a lot of unique project preparation tools that we use to do our work, especially when working closely and supporting our US companies while also establishing new relationships with our partners across the globe. Can you just take a couple of minutes to talk us through the project preparation tools that USTDA uses to accomplish its mission to create US jobs?
Sure. So I like to sort of consider our project tools in a number of buckets. The first, and I guess biggest bucket, being the early stage project preparation tools, such as feasibility studies and technical assistance that we offer. So typically, we will work with foreign governments or foreign private sector entities as our grantees. And they will be looking to do any sort of large-scale infrastructure project within their country, and they often come to USTDA for assistance on that front. And so if they're looking to do, say they're looking to refurbish a port, and they need to do a feasibility study, they will come to us and ask if we can provide some assistance. Also, as I mentioned, we offer technical assistance. We do a lot of expert analysis. We'll assist countries with their regulatory efforts in terms of the changes that they need to make so that US companies can be competitive in international tenders. We do a lot of work on the standards front to make sure, for the same reasons, that US companies and their products can be exported into those countries. The second bucket of the big tools that we use are reverse trade missions. Now, typically, people may be familiar with trade missions that are put on by either state trade agencies or the Department of Commerce, where US executives will travel overseas to meet with either foreign governments or other private sector entities. But in our reverse trade missions, we will bring buyers and government officials from other countries to the United States to really show them US technology solutions in action as they're looking to develop tenders for whatever infrastructure projects that they're developing. We will bring them to the US, take them typically to 2 or 3 different cities in the country, and show them all of our technology solutions that we think can be applicable to whatever it is that they're looking to build. And we found that that's a great way to really increase sales almost immediately, because usually there's either a procurement either just underway or soon to be underway. And so when those buyers come to the US and they've got those buying decisions, they are the decision makers, and they can see the great technologies, the great solutions that we offer. Typically, we've seen a number of sales close almost immediately after our reverse trade missions take place. We also do pilot projects. If there are technologies that have been proven commercially in the United States but have yet to be taken overseas, we'll work with individual US industry companies to test and pilot those technologies overseas to see if they're scalable in the countries where we work. We also do a number of conferences and workshops throughout the year. And we also have sort of it's sort of our secret weapon at USTDA in terms of being able to get deals closed when US firms are in direct competition with foreign competitors where the host governments of those companies may be subsidizing the bids that they've put in for international tenders. And so we do these things called training grants, but it's really a sweetener on top of the bid that a US firm may make in terms of an international tender, so that we can provide a grant to offer additional training on top of that bid, which gives a bigger incentive for either the government entity or the private sector entity that's got the tender on the table to choose and pick the US firm who's made that bid. And so those are the top tools that we use at USTDA. And I think we've been very successful over the years. We have had an incredible return on investment from the money that we spend programmatically in the agency. This past fiscal year, for every dollar we've spent programmatically, we've seen $111 in US exports as a result of those dollars that are spent. So we're proud of the work that we do. We're proud of the tools that we utilize, and we're very proud of the success that we've had.
Great, Todd. Thanks for that answer. If you don't mind, I'm just going to take a minute and highlight some opportunities for our Making Global Local partners and the businesses that they work with.
Sure.
As you mentioned, the reverse trade missions, those are certainly opportunities for our multiplier organizations, our MGL partners, to participate. And as well, I just want to highlight the business briefings. I like to refer to the business briefings as our shopping day. And that's really the opportunity that foreign delegation has to take to the microphone to talk specifically about what it is that they're looking to procure. Perhaps there's particular budget information they like to share, particular timelines that they're hoping to meet, or specific challenges that they're looking to overcome, or even new technologies that they're hoping to acquire. So that opportunity to share that information is often when they take to the microphone at the business briefing. I've talked to a number of our MGL partners who have shared that their businesses have had the opportunity to attend a business briefing, and it's been really pinnacle for them to start a relationship and to develop that relationship in terms of getting started and tracking on exports with a foreign entity. So I just want to kind of highlight that as an opportunity. Unfortunately, due to COVID, we don't currently have an RTM or a business briefing on the calendar, but I know that we will be working towards that as soon as it's safe. The other opportunity that I just want to mention for MGL partners are the workshops that USTDA provides, which are similar to a business briefing, but those are held in country. And those are really unique opportunities to take advantage of the programming that USTDA provides whenever you are working overseas. So for example, last spring, USTDA hosted a workshop in Dakar, South Africa, on aviation, and we had 8 foreign nations, delegates from 8 foreign nations participate, and it was a fairly cozy group of about 50 to 60 US companies that were able to convene in a central spot to talk about aviation and its successes. So it kind of beats, pounding the pavement at the Paris Air Show. So it's just something to note for the folks here that are gathered today. I wanted to talk to you briefly, just for our next question, Todd, about USTDA's key priority infrastructure sectors where we focus our work. And I know you're going to get to it, but I'd also throw in there why we talked about adding agribusiness this year to our repertoire.
Great, thank you. So for a number of years, probably the first 25, 26 years that the agency was in existence, we really focused on 3 major sectors, which were energy, transportation, and ICT or telecom. And we have done some great work in those 3 sectors over the time that we've been in existence. We have done amazing work in the energy sector all across sub-Saharan Africa. For the last several years, we've been doing a project with USAID called Power Africa, where we've really worked to electrify sub-Saharan Africa, providing millions of citizens across the continent electrification in their homes and their businesses. We've done a lot of work in, as Diane just said, aviation and transportation. We do a lot of work in the rail sector as well. And as far as telecom and ICT, information communications technology, we've done a lot of work in basically every continent across the globe, really, except for Australia and Antarctica. We don't work in high-income countries, so Australia is out, and Antarctica, as you know, is fairly low populated. So not a lot of opportunities there. But in terms of building out broadband networks, data centers, these types of things, we've done a lot of work in the ICT sector. But about 2 years ago, we really started thinking about expanding our priority sectors at USTDA. And in November of 2019, we finally elevated both healthcare and agribusiness to priority sectors within the agency. To answer your question about agribusiness, and look, I grew up in Kansas, so I understand that agriculture is a huge part of what Kansans do. But agriculture is also a huge part of what developing countries are focused on. And so in terms of the opportunities that we saw overseas in the development sector, in terms of the demand from US firms to operate in the countries where we operate and focus on agribusiness as a potential sector, that's really why we decided to upgrade agribusiness to be a priority sector at USTDA. We've done a lot of work previously before we elevated agribusiness to a priority sector in a number of countries where we focused not only on the export of individual commodities, but we did a lot of work in terms of helping with regulations for food. Obviously, food security in developing countries is an important issue. And so we've done a lot of work in cold chain logistics to make sure that foodstuffs are able to be transported effectively and efficiently and don't go to waste through that transportation process. And so because of the success that we have had in the past and realizing that demand that is really out there in the countries where we work, we decided to elevate agribusiness to a priority sector within the agency.
I know that I kind of fielded that agribusiness piece over to you, knowing your hometown roots. I also want to talk to you a little bit about energy. I know that energy is of specific interest to the Kansas City region and to the folks on the call today. Can you talk a little bit about USTDA's work in the energy sector and just the breadth and depth of our work in that sector? Because I know it really encompasses a broad spectrum and broad representation of US companies.
Yes, it really does. Energy is such a diverse sector. There are so many different subsectors within the sector, and we at USTDA really try to work in all of them. We like to talk about being a sort of an across-the-board agency in terms of what we do related to energy. So, we do everything from renewable resources, non-renewable resources. We work in the gas and oil subsectors. We work in the coal subsector. We do a lot of work in wind and solar in the renewable sector. We couple a lot of our projects that we do in the wind and solar space with battery storage, which has become a huge part of the work that we do over the last several years at USTDA. I'll probably talk a little bit more about this later, but in 2017, late 2017, the agency began a new initiative really focused on the export of US LNG. And so we've worked with a number of countries across the world to develop liquefied natural gas import terminals, regasification units, so that US LNG can be exported to those countries and be utilized. Obviously, the US has become one of the largest producers of LNG in the world, and one of the big benefits of that is to be able to export that commodity to other countries that need it. And so we focused a lot on that. Over the last couple of years, we've had a lot of renewed interest, let me say, in the nuclear sector. There are countries across the world that are looking to build sort of the old school nuclear facilities that you may know. Obviously, just north of Jefferson City in Missouri, not too far from Kansas City, there's a nuclear power plant. Domestically, we haven't seen a lot of demand for building new nuclear power plants, but across the world, there is still demand. There's also a new nuclear technology that's coming out that has to do with small modular reactors, where instead of building these really large nuclear facilities, you can build smaller ones that can be coupled together to provide even more megawatts of energy as the energy is produced. And so that is a new and really exciting part of the nuclear sector that we've been focused on at the agency. But across the board, whether it's non-renewable or renewable resources, we have put a lot of time and effort into developing our energy portfolio. And throughout the agency, we are roughly just under half of our entire portfolio is in the energy sector. So I've been back to Kansas City a couple of times since I have been to USTDA. One was for a reverse trade mission where we were touring power plants and showing some different potential U.S. technology solutions to the delegates that were here. As a matter of fact, I think we've got someone on today from Black & Veatch, and Black & Veatch was one of our partners on that reverse trade mission. So a lot of work in the energy sector, and pleased to do the work that we are doing there.
Great, Todd. It's kind of funny. It seems like everything is just kind of coming back home to Kansas with the mention of that reverse trade mission. You've provided a great segue. I was going to ask you about the various initiatives that USTDA focuses on, including the U.S. Gas Infrastructure Initiative, but I know you've talked a bit about that. Can I ask you to also talk a little bit about Access Africa and then the Global Procurement Initiative?
Sure. So one of our newest initiatives in the agency is our Access Africa initiative. As I mentioned before, we worked with USAID on Power Africa, which really enabled millions of people across the continent to finally get electricity in their homes and businesses. But in order to expand their economies even further, you really have to sort of go to the next step. And so for us and what we do at USTDA, the logical next step for us was to figure out, okay, everybody has a lot more access to electricity. Now we need to get them access to the internet. Obviously, online opportunities are the future of our economies, and to be able to build and expand broadband networks across sub-Saharan Africa has been one of our important goals at the agency. So we launched Access Africa in the middle of 2018, and we've got a number of really well-known partners in U.S. industry that have joined with us, Microsoft, Cisco, just to name a couple. But they are working with us very closely to build and define projects across the continent to really increase the number of internet access points throughout the countries where we're working and building those networks. And we're really doing everything we can to help those countries become economically stronger through building those broadband networks out. In terms of the Global Procurement Initiative that you mentioned, this was really, I think, one of the key initiatives that USTDA has done all throughout its history. Back in the early 2010s, we had a lot of companies coming to us saying that they weren't even participating in international tenders anymore because they just knew they weren't going to win. Typically, US firms are higher priced because they're higher quality and have better solutions than a number of solutions from other countries are. And so, that was very dismaying for us as an agency to hear that our companies weren't even getting involved. And so we wanted to just put our thinking caps on and figure out a way that we could be part of the solution. And so what we have done, we've created the Global Procurement Initiative. It started in 2013. And what we do through that initiative is we train procurement officials, sort of the official buyers for things in governments in countries where we work. So that they're looking at not just the lowest price, but they're looking at life cycle cost analysis for these large infrastructure projects that they're looking to build. And they're also looking at best value determinations in making those decisions. And so, we've trained literally thousands of procurement officials in our partner countries where we've put the program in place. And it's really paid dividends. Over the last 7 years, companies are not only telling us that they're getting involved, that they're bidding on international tenders again, but they're winning. And so that's important for us as an export promotion agency to know that companies are back in business in these overseas markets and that they're winning international tenders and we're realizing exports from those wins. And so in terms of the impact of what we do, I think it's been one of the most impressive initiatives that we have at the agency.
Great. Just talking about our initiatives, I know that we have a brand new one that we've just unveiled that you announced at the recent XM conference, the Global Infrastructure Resiliency Initiative. Could you talk for a few minutes about the GIRI initiative and the reason why it was formed and what USTDA hopes the outcomes of this new initiative will be?
Sure, thank you. So the new initiative was really, based on our thinking and our ability to continue to do what we do through the COVID pandemic. Obviously, the way that we're getting together today, technologically through, an internet connection is important. But a lot of countries where we operate may not have the exact same ability that we do because they don't have the internet connections that we have. And so to be able to build resilient networks, either in ICT or resilient networks in terms of, energy and electrical grids, we really wanted to think about how we could do the work that we do and continue to do the work that we do, but also build in resiliency in those projects. And so whether that's resiliency from, man-made disasters or natural disasters, a lot of the thinking that we are putting into moving forward is also part of this new initiative. And so currently we've got a call for initial proposals for the initiative up on our website right now. You can visit us at USTDA.gov to learn more about this initiative. And there's a section on our website where you can actually propose a potential solution or project for this particular initiative. So in terms of resilient infrastructure, that's something that the agency is going to be incredibly focused on, I think, over the next several years, and more than likely for the rest of the time that we're in existence. We need to be able to be resilient. We need to be able to continue to compete no matter what happens. And so I think our new Global Infrastructure Resilience Initiative is a great way to ensure that that resiliency is built in to the infrastructure projects that we're working on across the globe.
They say that timing is everything, and to be able to roll out the GIRI initiative here now during the pandemic is really a critical opportunity that our U.S. companies can take advantage of. As somebody who's worked a bit in emergency management in the past, and I had the opportunity to work on the last pandemic for vaccine distribution, there isn't really a single infrastructure sector that USTDA operates in that wouldn't be better off having some sort of resilience behind it. And I think the prowess that U.S. companies bring to the global markets in this area are second to none. So I see this as a great opportunity for those companies who may have seen regular opportunities that they were counting on dry up due to the pandemic to have that chance to investigate new markets and look at exporting where they hadn't considered the possibility of doing that in the past. So it's great that USTDA has rolled out this new initiative. Todd, I know you've had the chance to travel far and wide in your time with USTDA and have met a lot of really fantastic, phenomenal people and been to a lot of really interesting places. Do you have a particular favorite success story or experience that you'd like to share today?
Well, you're absolutely right, Diane. In the last almost 3 years that I've been with the agency, I've traveled the globe, been to 5 continents, so many countries I can't even count. But two things really stand out to me since joining the agency. The first was a trip that I took with the President's Advisory Council on doing business in Africa. It was a 2-week trip to 4 different countries, and through USTDA, we actually added a 5th country because we made a side trip to Uganda. But we went to Ethiopia, Kenya, Uganda, Cote d'Ivoire, and Ghana. And we traveled with the Secretary of Commerce, Wilbur Ross, and really had an opportunity to see the impact that U.S. companies have in the countries across the world, and tried to figure out how we could do an even better job of doing business across that continent. So that was an incredible opportunity and a great trip for me. The second one was just last year in Bangkok, Thailand, when we sponsored the second iteration of the Indo-Pacific Business Forum. And my colleague Verinda will probably talk about the third iteration that's coming up soon in October. But we had almost 1,000 different attendees from all over Southeast Asia and South Asia come together in Bangkok to look at how we can continue to do better work and have better trade with the countries throughout that region. And it was an incredible event, and we're really looking forward to doing it again this year.
Great, thanks so much for sharing that information, Todd. I think it's really helpful to give everybody kind of the picture of just how broad it is where we do our work. With that, I'm going to ask Sydney if she wouldn't mind to bring Verinda up on the screen. And Todd alluded to it in his last comments, but just talking about doing business in Africa, make sure you keep an eye on USTDA's press releases, because we've announced a number of grant signings and agreements just this week in Africa. And I know we have more to come before the end of the fiscal year, so definitely stay tuned. Verinda, with that, I'm going to turn to you now. I want to take a moment just to introduce Verinda Fike. She's the Regional Director for the Indo-Pacific Region for USTDA, and she's responsible for developing the agency's strategy and focusing on our infrastructure and project preparation activities in the region. Verinda has been with the agency now for more than a decade, and notably, she's traveled to more than 50 countries and has assisted with projects pretty much on every continent, maybe not Antarctica. But anyway, with that, Verinda, I wanted to talk to you a little bit to see, to make sure we're on the same page in terms of understanding what the opportunities are within the Indo-Pacific region. Can you talk a little bit about what is the geography of the Indo-Pacific region and how USTDA plays a key part in helping the administration to really bring together the administration's Indo-Pac strategy?
Great. Thanks so much, Diane. And it's a pleasure to be here. As was mentioned at the beginning, I also hail from Kansas City. So this is a lot like coming back home. So really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you all. For the Indo-Pacific region, it's a vast area of the globe. And we kind of think of it starting from Afghanistan, working south through India, through Southeast Asia, and all the way to the Pacific Islands. And within that section, we do have some priority countries where we're most active and where we've heard from U.S. industry where they see the most opportunities. And those include India, Indonesia, Malaysia, the Philippines, Thailand, and Vietnam. And in this region, we do have partnerships with some like-minded countries such as Australia and Japan to support quality infrastructure projects in the region. And that has enabled us to open new doors to supporting projects. For instance, in the Pacific Islands, we supported our first grant ever to Papua New Guinea this past year, with much thanks to our partnership with the Australians. In terms of how USTDA plays within the US government administration's Indo-Pacific strategy, we are very plugged in. We're really on the front lines of American-led infrastructure in the region. And we're very much looked to in terms of coming in at the earliest stages of project design to create bankable projects. What we continue to hear in the region is that there are some great project opportunities and there are clearly infrastructure needs, but to get them to a bankable status is often difficult. And that's really where USTDA's tools come into play. The administration has launched new initiatives focused on digital cooperation and cybersecurity, on infrastructure, as well as energy. And those are three areas that are very aligned with USTDA's mission. And so we're very active in terms of the US government approach to the region.
Great, thank you for taking the time to talk a little bit about just the geography and the breadth. I wanted to ask you next, I know that USTDA has a unique opportunity coming up on the calendar with an event that is going to be held on October 27th and 28th, the Indo-Pacific Business Conference. Can I ask you to talk a little bit about the conference itself and the activities surrounding it, and then perhaps if you can share any success stories from last year's conference?
I would love to talk about the forum. I encourage everyone to register if you haven't already. It's a free event, and this is actually the third iteration, as Todd mentioned as well. We had a great successful event last year in Bangkok which was a live person event. And this year it's going to be a hybrid event. So Vietnam is the host for the ASEAN meetings this year. And in recognition of that, there will be a half-day in-person event in Hanoi, Vietnam. That's going to be supported by the American Chambers of Commerce, as well as the Vietnamese Chambers of Commerce. But in addition to that, on the 27th and 28th, there will be a virtual platform in the evenings on the US time. I think it'll start at 8 p.m. Kansas City time. And this is really going to be focused on infrastructure opportunities in the Indo-Pacific region. We expect very high level of participation from the US government, from the Vietnamese government, as well as chiefs of missions from embassies from the various countries in the Indo-Pacific region. Some of the key themes that will be addressed include infrastructure, energy, healthcare, as well as transportation. You'll also be learning about financing and sort of new market entry issues that might be helpful to some participants on this call. And there's also going to be chances for one-on-one and pull-asides, as well as virtual booths that are set up where you can engage with US government officials or private sector partners or overseas international potential sponsors to meet with them to see if you can develop relationships there. So we're really looking forward to this new world of virtual events that we're all party to, but I think this will be a very exciting and informative event.
Great, thank you for sharing that information. And I'll go ahead and put the link to the conference registration here in the chat for everyone to see in just a moment. Just as a follow-up, I wanted to kind of highlight some of the small businesses that may be on the line today. And in particular, if there are opportunities for small businesses to register and participate in the Indo-Pacific Business Forum, and just any other information about the conference, if there's a cost to register or to participate.
Great. Absolutely. The event is free, so very much encourage you to register. I think it will provide a significant amount of useful information, especially for small businesses. We really look at this as an opportunity for US companies that are interested in exporting, but don't necessarily, well, can't really travel at the moment, like none of us can. But I think, bringing those buyers directly to you virtually, I think will have a lot of value add. And I think hearing from other companies who have had success in the region, sharing best practices and secrets to those success will be a part of the conversation as well. So certainly encourage small businesses to join the conversation, as there will be a focus on small businesses at the conference as well. And I did want to just highlight a success. I know I didn't answer your question from previously, in terms of what we achieved last year. And just one that comes to mind, we had a number of deliverables that came out of it, but one in particular stands out was for a 5G deal in the Philippines where we supported US company Cisco for a deal worth hundreds of millions of dollars, going head to head against their Chinese competition for a deal with the Philippines' largest telecom provider, PLDT. And because of TDA's assistance in trying to provide some additional training on top of this tender, we were able to see success, and Cisco was able to win that tender as a result of our assistance for that particular tender. So there's a number of successes that we had from the forum from last year, but certainly that's one that comes to mind.
Well, that's a pretty notable success. Congratulations on that. And I hope that we have many more of that coming out of this year's forum next month. I wanted to switch gears just a little bit and focus on another one of USTDA's new sectors that we added for infrastructure this year, that being healthcare. And I will note that it's great to have you on the call today, Verinda, as the sector lead for both healthcare and agribusiness for both of our new sectors. Can you talk a little bit about why USTDA decided to focus more on healthcare and start an infrastructure sector specific to healthcare, and what we're hoping to see in terms of outcomes?
Absolutely. So healthcare is a personal passion of mine, so I was really excited to see this elevated last year. And USTDA is a very data-driven agency. So, we sometimes pilot some areas where we think that we might have some success before diving in fully to support a particular sector. And in healthcare, that was definitely the case. So we had started initially piloting some healthcare activities in China through a larger healthcare cooperation program that was started there in 2012. And doing some regulatory training, as well as organizing some reverse trade missions focused on medical devices and pharmaceuticals, and as well as executive training for hospital officials. And as a result of that engagement, we saw certainly our export multiplier rise significantly. And so we've seen a number of US companies benefit in healthcare. I think globally, if you look in terms of sector expertise that America is known for, healthcare certainly comes to mind in terms of the quality that American healthcare firms provide, as well as the safety associated with the American healthcare system. And so those issues combined, I think led to the decision for USTDA to elevate the sector, even though we had done 100 activities in the healthcare sector. So it was not necessarily new to us, but it has been a renewed focus for the agency. We decided to do that actually before COVID-19 came on the world stage. So, we had already put in some action items in place to elevate healthcare and do more healthcare activities. But we do see significant opportunities for US companies in this area, ranging from medical devices to helping the cold chain supply for pharmaceuticals to get to hospitals, to hospital design, which is more critical than ever to make sure that the circulation is appropriate and safe. And certainly for services as well, we see, really that is an area where America shines, and exporting those services to some of these underserved markets is a growing priority that we will continue to see.
There's certainly no shortage of focus right now on healthcare and in the healthcare sector with the pandemic, and definitely I think the work that USTDA has done with cold chain specifically will be so important for pretty much every nation across the globe to consider as our attention turns to developing a vaccine that will beat back the virus. I'm going to transition a bit, Brenda. I want to go back to energy and take you back again to Asia. I know that USTDA, as part of its initiatives, has the Asia Edge program, which is in support of one of the administration's key priorities. Can you talk a little bit about the energy sector, specifically to the Asia Edge program, and any successes or projects that you see coming forth from that?
Absolutely. So this has been a very active area for USTDA engagement, and it really runs across the board. We really have engaged on the renewable side, especially in looking at battery storage, in wind generation, as well as connecting those resources to the grid. So anything along the smart grid and digital side, as well as improving, collections for various discos that we work with in the region. And then looking at oil and gas. So in support of our gas infrastructure export initiative, we've seen, significant uptick in feasibility studies for LNG imports, as well as just on the regulatory side for the oil and gas sector. So those are primarily the areas where we've been most engaged. Certainly clean coal and carbon capture, utilization and storage are other areas where we're heavily engaged in places like India. So it's really, across the full spectrum of energy technology. And we've really seen how it's been beneficial for US companies that offer, the cutting edge technology that a lot of our partners are looking for in the region.
Thank you for that. That's really helpful. I know we're kind of trucking right through this hour pretty quickly. I just want to take the moment to announce for folks that are tuning in today, if you'd like to ask a question at this point, if you want to take advantage of the chat box, we can use that to moderate any questions that are coming in from the audience. And while we're waiting for those questions to come in, Brenda, I'm going to come back and ask you one last question, just going back to your experience in the Indo-Pacific region and how U.S. exports have made an example in a developing economy there, made an impact, excuse me, in the region. So if there's a success story that you'd like to highlight among any of the sectors, if you could share that with us.
Great, thanks. Well, I'm actually going to put on my previous Middle East hat because I see a former colleague, Josh Kaplan, is on, so he may be familiar with this one. But one example, and Josh, I know, works at the Department of Commerce in Kansas City and leads their office there, so it's great to see you, Josh. But one example that comes to mind in Jordan actually is our support for the ministry there to develop an electronic medical records system. We started with a pilot project with just a couple of companies to support the project in Jordan, and that led actually to a nationwide electronic medical record system for the Kingdom of Jordan that they implemented, and it supported over a dozen US companies that were part of the EMR project, as well as a telemedicine element to that. So it's, I think in healthcare especially, it's really impactful to see what infrastructure can do in terms of improving people's livelihoods. And so that's certainly an example that comes to mind where we've seen the win-win that we talk about at USTDA of mutual benefit of connecting US companies to an infrastructure opportunity, but also improving the lives of the people in the countries where we work.
Great, thank you so much for that. And as we move into the Q&A portion, I'm going to ask if Sydney, would you mind bringing Todd Aberjano back onto the screen so he can help us ask or to respond to some of these questions. As we're waiting for questions to come in, I'm going to kick off with one. Todd, I'd be curious just to talk with you a little bit about USTDA and how we work with small companies specifically. I know talking about some of the impacts that COVID has had, this week is now National Small Business Week and being recognized by the administration and the Small Business Administration specifically. And previously this recognition had been planned for the spring, but got rescheduled due to COVID. Can you talk a little bit about how USTDA works with small businesses and the impact they can have, and anything else you'd like to share about our work with small businesses?
Sure, thank you. We love doing business with small and medium-sized enterprises at USTDA. There's the Small Business Administration has this sort of base metric that they like to see all the other agencies across government do roughly 23-22% of their contracts with small businesses. We've been very proud at USTDA that over the last several years, we have not only hit that metric, but we have almost tripled it. We have typically been in the high 50s to low 60s in terms of our contracting with small and medium-sized businesses. And I think this past year, we almost got up to 67%. And so a lot of the work that we do is with companies of that size. On the feasibility study front, a lot of the work that we do are with smaller contractors that have been doing that type of work, service-based work for a long, long time. And if there are companies in Kansas City that are interested in doing that, they can certainly give us a call and figure out how that they can get involved as well. Black and Veatch, I mentioned them earlier. We work with them quite a bit. They may be a little bigger than your normal small or medium-sized enterprise, but they're a great company, and we work with them quite often. But we're proud of the work that we do on the small business front, and look forward to continuing that work into the future.
Great, thank you. Thank you for your answer regarding the small businesses, Todd. I wanted to just shift a little bit. I know we've talked a lot about our in-person events and what we typically do with reverse trade missions and business briefings, and even our workshops that we hold overseas. Todd, can you just take a minute, and then Brenda, I think you can probably chime in a little bit with your information on IPBF, but to talk a little bit about how COVID has impacted USTDA's business on a day-to-day basis right now, and when do you think that our reverse trade missions will come back in place?
Sure. So we've been fairly impacted at USTDA in terms of COVID. The first 2+ years I was at the agency, I considered an airplane my second home because I was on one. It seemed like at least 2 or 3 times a week. I haven't traveled since early March when I was in Montego Bay for a ministerial conference, but that hasn't stopped the agency completely. We continue to do the work that we do. A lot of the staff at the agency on the programmatic side would do business development trips overseas. Those obviously have stopped. And so we've had to learn and figure out new and better ways to continue our work and stay productive through COVID. So with our reverse trade missions, it's true, we aren't bringing people to the US at the moment, but we can still try to do that virtually. And so, we've been looking at ways that we can convert our typical reverse trade missions to virtual reverse trade missions. The same as you mentioned with our business briefings. We're trying to figure out ways to do that virtually as well. Brenda mentioned the Indo-Pacific Business Forum. I'll let her talk about that. But there are a number of things that we typically would do by getting on an airplane or having our partners get on an airplane and come visit us here in the States that we're just not doing anymore. But we've been on mandatory telework in the agency since March. And so we've had to figure out ways internally to process all the things that we typically would do in our office space. When I first came to the agency, we were a very paper-driven agency, and now almost every single process that we have in the agency has been digitized. So, that's, I guess, the silver lining of COVID, right? We've gotten to move our agency into the 21st century, and everything's electronic these days, which is great. But we're not going to take COVID lying down. We're going to continue to fight and do what we do at USTDA because it's important work. It's important work for the partners that we have overseas, and it's certainly very important work so that we can continue to help make U.S. companies more successful.
Thanks for that. And I want to just kind of give a nod to Verinda in terms of the events. As somebody who works in public affairs and marketing for the agency, watching all of our events have to be, so focused on coming soon or, what will be coming. I think the Indo-Pacific Business Forum kind of wins the nod for being our first event in quite some time that we can invite a mass audience to. Is that right?
That's right, Diane. Yes, I think especially of this magnitude, and I think as Todd alluded to, we're trying to stay focused on the silver lining that now the forum can reach a lot more people than we had initially thought if it was going to be an in-person event. So I think that's the positive, and it's very interesting to see the technology has changed so much to host virtual events. And I think we've got a terrific platform to make it still engaging. I know people can get a little tired of Zoom calls or other virtual webinars that are happening. So, we have plans to make it as engaging as possible. And I think hopefully we'll achieve that. But we're, I think, like the rest of the world, trying to introduce some creativity and innovation to make lemonade out of this difficult time.
Right. Great. Thank you for that. I do have a question that's come in that I want to take a second to focus on before we close today. The question is, how does USTDA overlap with the IFI, so that would be the World Bank and other development banks, and the Millennium Challenge Corporation?
Well, let me take a first whack at that, and Verinda, if you've got anything to add, feel free to jump in. We work very closely with multilateral development banks at USTDA because one of the more important things that we want to ensure for the projects that we help on the front end is that they are bankable after our feasibility studies, and that they can actually see implementation on the back end. And so we've done a number of things with a number of the multilateral development banks, including signing memorandums of cooperation with them to work more closely. Verinda and I were in the Philippines last year and met with the folks at the Asian Development Bank. So we do work very closely with the development banks across the globe. In terms of MCC, they have a very unique mandate as we do. So there isn't a lot of overlap between what we do and what MCC does, but there are certain times and certain compacts that they're involved in with individual countries where we may have opportunities to cooperate and collaborate to ensure that the work that MCC is focused on is getting done. And as an added benefit, we can come in to assist and ensure that U.S. companies may get a slice of the work that MCC is doing in those countries. So, Brenda, I'll turn it over to you if you've got anything additional to add.
Yeah, I mean, I think a good example with the MCC is for their contracts, the compacts that they do, sometimes they'll come in, I can think of the example in Indonesia, and sort of lay the groundwork for future USTDA work. And I think especially when it comes to procurement, so they went in and did a lot of sort of groundwork of improving the procurement system there. And once the compact was done in Indonesia, then USTDA was able to come in with more targeted assistance for procurement training for some of their key officials that we're working on now. So that's one area, you know, we do coordinate very closely with MCC, as a lot of times there's things that we can build around what they're doing in their compact. So yeah, and then on the IFIs, I think, you know, Todd hit the nail on the head in terms of how we work really closely with them and try to make sure that our projects are in their pipeline and try to track their pipelines to make sure that we can, you know, support what they're trying to do as well.
I know we have one last question that came in. If I can try and share my screen just to show the folks on the phone. We had a question that was asking about how to direct requests, and you can always direct a request back to me. I just put my information in the chat box, but you'll see this section here for regions. Hopefully everyone can see my screen if I've shared it correctly, but if you go to the USTDA website at ustda.gov, you'll see as the different regions as well as the different sectors are highlighted. And at the bottom of those regions and sectors, you'll find contact information that is available for you to reach out directly, or please feel free to reach out to me through the chat box. And with that, I want to turn the call back over to our hosts.
Thank you, Diane. Hello, everyone. My name is Melissa Miller. I'm the Senior Manager for the World Trade Center here in Kansas City. I want to thank everyone again for joining us for today's webinar. We hope you enjoyed today's event. And just as a reminder, as Joe mentioned earlier, this recording will be available to all of our registered attendees. We'll send that link out, and it's also available through our YouTube channel. A special thank to all of our USTDA speakers. I'm glad to have you virtually. We wish we could welcome you to Kansas City, but we'll save that for a later date. We appreciate it. And the World Trade Center Kansas City staff, we just want to know that we are available to help your businesses succeed in the global marketplace. Please feel free to reach out to us with any of your international trade needs. Thank you all again, and have a wonderful day.